I thought it was just a simple coincidence until the radio started saying my name at 3 in the morning. I never wanted that thing in my house. I found it out in the shed, lying between rusty tools and my grandfather's old boxes. It was an old, heavy radio, covered in a black substance that seemed to be breathing. It had no cord, no plug, nothing. And still, that same night, exactly at 3 a.m. sharp, it turned on by itself. At first, it was just static, like broken breaths inside the noise. I went to turn it off, but it wouldn't turn off. In the middle of the buzzing, I heard a very faint voice, trapped in the interference. "Is anyone there?" I answered yes. And the radio went silent for a few seconds before saying something I still can't forget to this day. "I've been waiting for you."
Real horrors.
The first time, I thought it was a coincidence, until the radio started saying my name. I never wanted that thing in my house. I didn't even want to live here. This was my grandfather's house, an old, isolated place with that smell of damp wood and memories nobody asked for. When he died, I was the only one in the family who agreed to stay for a while to take care of it. But the truth is, I was just running away from my own life, from debts, from problems, from people. At first, everything was silence and routine. I woke up late, made coffee with the old machine that had already turned yellow, checked my phone even though I almost never had signal, and then I would just sit there, listening to the house complain with every change in temperature. Creaks in the walls, footsteps that weren't really footsteps, just the wood settling. That's what I kept telling myself. Out back, at the far end of the property, there was the shed. My grandfather always kept it locked, with a padlock. When I was a kid, he used to tell me, "That's where I keep old things that don't work. But I don't want to throw away." I never saw what was inside. I only remembered the feeling that place didn't want to be looked at. The day I decided to open it was out of pure necessity. The power had gone out the night before because of a storm, and I needed to find a flashlight or some extra candles. The padlock was still there, but the metal was so worn that a single hit with a rock was enough to break it. When I opened the door, the smell hit me right away. A dense, sour smell, like old moisture mixed with something more metallic. Inside, there was a bit of everything: rusty tools, stacked boxes, broken furniture, a bicycle with no tires, bags full of clothes nobody ever used again. And in one corner, almost buried under a pile of rags and cables, I saw it. A radio. Old. Heavy. It had a worn wooden casing with parts that looked burned or stained, and a front grille covered in a dark, sticky substance, as if someone had tried to scrub it off by force and given up halfway through. I ran my finger over it and felt it was dry, but at the same time, sticky, like dried blood. I picked it up. I don't know why. It made no sense. I don't know if it was curiosity, nostalgia, or that stupid feeling that you can fix old things. I took it into the house, set it on a kitchen table, and that's when I realized it had no cord, no plug, nothing, just a heavy casing with stiff knobs that barely turned. I even thought maybe it was just decorative. One more keepsake my grandfather had kept for no real reason. That same day, I asked my mom on the phone if she remembered anything about the radio. She said yes, that the radio had been in the family for many years, that my grandfather never let anyone touch it, that when he was young, he listened to every game, every news broadcast, even radio dramas on it, and that there was a time when he swore the radio answered him back. I laughed. I told her it was probably just old man stuff. She went quiet for a few seconds and then added something I didn't want to process at that moment. The only thing I'll tell you is that when your grandfather started saying the radio talked to him, that's when he started sleeping less and less. That night, at exactly 3 a.m., the radio turned on by itself. I was in the kitchen drinking water. I hadn't been sleeping well for days, but that early morning I felt especially restless. All of a sudden, the silence was cut by a low sound, static, that dry, uneven noise, like ragged breaths mixed with sand in your ears. At first, I thought it was the TV, or that some weird signal had gotten into my phone. But no, the sound was coming from the shed. I knew it. I don't know how, but I knew. I walked down the hallway, carefully opened the back door. The air was colder than usual, like there was a brutal temperature difference between the house and the yard. Every step toward the shed sounded exaggeratedly loud on the damp ground. I opened the door. The radio was there, on top of an old table, turned on. The light inside it flickered with a sickly orange tone, like the last glow of a cigarette before it dies out. The black substance covering it seemed to move, very slowly, as if it were breathing. I got closer. I don't know why. I guess you always think there's a logical explanation. Always. I turned the knob. Nothing. I tried to turn it off. Nothing. The static grew louder, stronger, more present, as if it were filling the entire room. Then I heard something. Within the noise, a voice, very faint. Hello. A dry chill ran up the back of my neck. It wasn't a normal broadcast. There was no music, no station, just that voice, trapped inside the static. Is anyone there? I froze. I looked around. I was alone, completely alone. Yes, I answered without thinking. The silence was immediate, total, as if the radio had held its breath, and then the voice came back. But this time it didn't hesitate. I've been waiting for you. That's when something snapped inside me. I grabbed it hard, shook it, turned it off by unplugging it, even though it had no plug. I threw it onto the floor, left it in the shed, locked the door. I didn't sleep that night. Every little noise sounded like footsteps. Every shadow like a figure. I kept telling myself I was just tired, that there was a logical explanation for everything, that it was stress, loneliness, the old house, whatever. I almost convinced myself. Almost. At exactly 3 a.m., the sound came back. But not from the shed. It came from the hallway. The noise cut through my bedroom door, as if someone had placed an old radio right outside. That static, that buzzing I already knew. I opened the door. The hallway light was dim, and the radio was there, on the table, dripping that same black substance, leaving a thick trail from the shed door, all the way into the house. I didn't remember bringing it in. I hadn't touched it since I threw it. The shed key was still in my pocket. The voice spoke again. But now, it was clearer, closer. I don't like being alone. I felt something in my throat, like I couldn't breathe. A pressure as if something invisible had sat on my chest. "Who are you?" I asked. There was a short silence, a silence that felt like someone had turned off the entire world for a second. And then, "I'm the one you heard before they turned me off." I didn't understand, or I didn't want to. The radio changed. The static warped, grew sharper, dirtier, and suddenly it stopped being just noise. It became a scream, a human scream, desperate, distorted, broken up by bangs, and then cut off in an instant. I took a step back, then another. My body moved on its own, like it wanted to run, before my mind could process what it was hearing. "That was me," the voice said. I backed away, tripped over a chair, fell to the floor. I tried to get up, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely push myself up. I tried to get out of the house. I threw myself at the front door, turned the handle. It wouldn't open. It wasn't locked. There was no key in it. It just wouldn't open. As if someone on the other side were holding the handle. The radio began to vibrate, harder, more violently. The knobs turned by themselves. The inner light flickered more intensely, like a heart about to explode. "Now you hear me," the voice said, "and soon someone will hear you." The house lights flickered, once, twice, 3 times. Everything went black. I don't know how long I stayed on the floor, breathing fast in the dark, with the sound of the vibration burned into my head. When the lights came back, the radio was on the floor, off, lifeless. I grabbed it with a rag without touching it directly, took it out to the yard, threw it into the metal trash can, poured gasoline on it, and set it on fire. The smell was horrible, like burning plastic mixed with flesh. The black substance bubbled, twisted, seemed to fight against the flames. When it finally turned into charred pieces, I could breathe again. I told myself it was over, that whatever had been in there was gone. The next day, without having slept, I went into town. I went to a pawn shop to see if I could sell some stuff from the house. The man there, an older guy, asked me where I was living. I gave him the address. He looked at me strangely, then smiled nervously and just said, "Oh, the old man with the radio's house." I asked him what he knew. I didn't want to, but I needed to hear it. He told me that many years ago, my grandfather became obsessed with that radio, that before it was in the shed, he kept it in the living room, always on, that there was a time when, at 3 a.m, people saw him talking to himself in front of the device, answering pauses nobody else could hear, that once the power went out in the whole area, and the only thing still on was his radio, and that one day my grandfather stopped going out, stopped going into town, stopped talking to people. You could only hear the radio from the street every night until one day, total silence. When they found him, he was sitting in front of the radio, dead. The radio was off, the power cut. Nobody understood how they had heard it for so many days if there had been no electricity. When the shop owner finished talking, he looked at me seriously and said, "If that radio turned on again, it didn't do it by itself." I went back to the house with a weight in my chest. That night, I slept in the living room, far from the hallway, far from the door that led to the shed, far from where the radio had been. I set my phone with an alarm, with music, with whatever would make noise. I didn't want to hear static again. Even so, at exactly 3 a.m., I woke up. Not because of an alarm, not because of a loud sound. I woke up because someone whispered my name in my ear. I opened my eyes wide. The house was silent. My phone had shut off, as if the battery had suddenly died. The TV was off too. Everything was mute. I stayed lying there, not moving. And then I heard it. A very soft hum, not from the shed, not from the hallway, from the kitchen. I got up, walking slowly, feeling every floorboard a creak under my feet. When I peeked my head around the corner, I almost threw up from the shock. On the table, right where I had left it the first time, was the radio. Whole, its casing cracked but intact, the black grill dripping that thick substance onto the tablecloth. I had watched it burn. I had destroyed it myself. But there it was, on. I told you someone would hear you soon, the voice said. The static mixed with something else, with laughter, with sobs, with distant thuds. What do you want from me? I asked out of breath. The radio went quiet for a few seconds. Then the voice spoke, but it no longer sounded like just one person. It was many voices speaking at the same time, layered, pushing each other to come out first. I want you to listen to us. I want you not to turn us off. I want you to know what it feels like. The kitchen light grew dim. The walls seemed to close in. My head felt heavy, as if I were underwater. The radio started playing things. Fragments, scenes, an argument, an accident, a child crying, the screech of a door, a pleas, no, choked off by a dull blow. They were moments from other people's lives, cut-off screams, interrupted pleas for help, all mixed inside that old box. Everyone you ever listened to, the main voice whispered. Nobody believed them. Nobody cared. Just noise. I felt tears in my eyes without realizing it. I don't know if it was fear, helplessness, or something else. And what do I have to do with this? I asked. The radio laughed, a laugh that sounded like bare wires sparking. You answered. You said yes when I asked if someone was there. You opened the door. Now it doesn't close so easily. I wanted to break it again, throw it to the floor, stomp on it, smash it to pieces. But when I reached out my hand, I felt something cold grab my wrist. There was no one there, no hands. But the pressure was real, a firm, icy grip that held me in place. The radio began changing frequencies on its own. It cycled through white noise, distorted voices, fragments so short I could barely understand them. Until suddenly, I heard something that froze me. My own voice. It wasn't a memory. It wasn't something I had said before. It was me, begging for help. Please, if anyone can hear me, my voice said, broken, desperate. Don't turn me off. Don't leave me here. The voice coming out of the radio sounded like it was far away, like it was coming from a tight place with no air. And in the background, behind my own voice, I heard banging against metal, as if I were locked inside a box. That's what you're going to be, the original voice said. Just one more noise. Someone they hear, but don't understand. A scream that always comes too late. In that moment, the pressure on my wrist vanished. I fell backward, struggling to breathe, my vision blurry. The radio turned off, this time with no drama, no sparks, no smoke. It just shut down. Days went by. The house went back to its routine of old creaks and uncomfortable silences. I never saw the radio again, not on the table, not in the shed, not in the trash, nothing. I thought about leaving, about abandoning the house, selling it, burning it down, whatever, but something kept me there, a mix of fear and a sense of debt, as if closing the door and forgetting everything would be unfair to them, to the voices. And then the worst part began. For the last 3 nights, at exactly 3 a.m., with no radio, no sound, nothing turned on, I hear my own voice, begging for help from somewhere I'm not. There are no devices, no equipment. The voice doesn't come from any object. It comes from the walls, from the ceiling, from the floor. Sometimes I hear it in the bathroom while I'm looking at myself in the mirror. My mouth is shut, but my voice is crying from the corner. Sometimes I hear it in the bedroom, under the bed, banging like I'm trapped down there. And last night I heard it right behind me, so close I could feel the breath on the back of my neck. "Don't turn me off," it said. "I'm still here in this house. I don't know how much time I have left before I stop being me and become just another frequency, trapped somewhere no one can see. That's why I'm telling this. That's why I'm recording this. If you're listening to my voice right now, if you're hearing this story, I just want to ask you one thing. If one night at 3 a.m, an old radio turns on by itself, don't answer when it asks if someone's there. Because once you respond, it doesn't matter how many times you turn the device off. The voice that keeps playing will be yours